Greetings and welcome to Conversations at Noon on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. I'm Tammy Denise. In 1995, the General Assembly established the Connecticut Freedom Trail as a law to tell the narratives of the Black and African American community for their fight for dignity and freedom. Today, we have with us Dr. Orisade Awodola. She is a leading academic on ancestral healing, launching the field of root psychology in 2014 through her doctoral research. Her ancestral healing identity model is currently being prepared for review as an evidence-based therapy model. Awodola holds both undergraduate and graduate degrees in psychology from Antioch University. Dr. Awodola has taught ancestral healing workshops at London's King College and Ghana's W.E.B. Du Bois Cultural Center, and she has directed numerous U.S.-based recovery centers. Her practice specializes in co-occurring disorders, particularly among descendants of ancestral trauma, including lineages that survived the Atlantic slave trade, the Trail of Tears, and the Holocaust. And before we get started, once again, welcome to you on whatever platform you are watching us on. Please feel free to enter any questions or comments that you may have, because we will have a question and answer session at the end of her program. Welcome, Dr. Orisade Awodola. You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you for having me. This is quite exciting. I think you guys are doing fantastic work over there. Hello.
Thank you, Dr. Orisade. So
We
we're going so thank you very much for that. It is now your time to talk to us and tell us what you have going on and what was the basis of your book, as well as talk to us about being the third generation of a descendant of Reverend James W.C. Pennington.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was trying to pull up. Well, I can't. Let me just say it quickly. Okay, so I started. I was a clinical therapist in DC, and then I realized that in mental health, um, clinical psychology, basically psychotherapy, not as much as CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, was a means to expose or reveal or diagnose what a disorder was, right? A mental disorder, such as a mood disorder, is depression, and so forth, and we go on with personality disorders. But that was just determining what was wrong, but it wasn't healing because it's a lot of it is medication based. But I was doing ancestral healing workshops. I did them at UGC and also at Antioch, and it sparked what sparked my curiosity is that when I was attending Roosevelt University, I was the president of, this was in 19, because I went back to school. This was in 1987 or 88 as the president of Black um, Student Union. I wanted to do something different for Black History Month, right? Not the same people that people focus on every year. And so in Chicago, there's a place called the DuSable Museum. And so at that time, Dr. Margaret Burroughs was still living. So I asked, could we borrow some of the uh, uh, African artifacts that they had to display them in the lobby of the university? She did. So in my browsing through the library, Chicago had a set of what's called impact books, and they had James W.C. Pennington. And I looked, and the hair just stood up on my arm. I said, "Who is this? I know who Alonzo Pennington is." And then I took the book, and with it was an image of him in it, to my aunt. And I said, I covered up the name. I said, "Who is this?" She said, "Well, that's your grandpa Pennington." I said, "He's in this book." She said, "Yeah, he wrote the book, The Fugitive Blacksmith." That was Alonzo's father. So I'm shocked. So that sparked my interest to look at who he was as a blacksmith. As life progressed, I just started going down the family tree. And then my great aunt, she was the one who gave me the original book, which I was going to show you all, but I can't seem to bring up those things. Um, and he, in the book, he told his story. And so the important thing about his story was that, let me see if I can bring this up. Um, Let me give me one more minute to try to share this. Okay, I'm trying to get this. Can you guys see it? No. Can you see this? No.
No, sorry, we can't see
Oh,
it.
yeah. Okay. I'll read what I said in the front of my book and get back to the story. So this was what was in his book. And it said, I have many other deeply interesting particulars touching our family history, but I have detailed as many as prudence will permit on account of those members who are yet south of Mason and Dixon's lines. I have faith in the hand that has dealt with us so strangely that all our remaining members will in time be brought together, and then the case may merit a reviewed and enlarged edition of this tract, The Fugitive Blacksmith, when other important matter will be inserted. Okay, that's in the foreword of my book, Africa-Centered Ancestral Healing. So the story is a long one, so I'm short-circuiting things. So after Yale University honored him in September of last year with a matriculate degree, and I saw all these YouTube videos on him, I said, why are they not talking about the family? Now, I was already in the process of writing my book, and no one seemed to know about us. And so that was when I said, okay, I need to talk more about that piece that they have missing. And then when we were in Connecticut is when I ran across Connecticut Freedom Trail. I've never met Tammy Denise in person, but I saw Andre Kitt on the show one time, and he did a presentation on Dr. Pennington. And that really sparked my interest. And then with all the great things that this program and organizations does, I was like, who are they? And so what happened after that was that I could connect you with her about my book, and we have a YouTube video series as well. So the book really is coming from a holistic Africa-centered mental health process. And I say that because I know I'm kind of seeing maybe jumping back and forth, but this is exactly how it came, is that the fact that I learned more about, well, I added to what I already knew after I saw some things about him. Like, I didn't know he was part of the Amistad Project. And I didn't know he started the New York Legal Rights Association. All we knew was this. He was a blacksmith. This family on the Pennington side had a family trait of keeping the names, the first names. So his Aunt Jenny her name was really Virginia. And his father's name was Basil. And then the thing about that was that I am in the tradition of Ifa. Okay. And so the significance of me saying that is because when I followed the slave manifest of Basil, he was from Burkina Faso. He was from the Dablo people of Burkina Faso, a portion of where they were all blacksmiths, and they were priests of this energy in Ifa named Ogun. And I remember when I first came into the tradition, I was told during a prophetic session that I had inherited this energy, Ogun. I don't call it a deity because that's not what it is. The energy is iron and what iron represents. And I was just blown away with that, And so James Pennington was also a blacksmith, and Alonzo was also a blacksmith. And so when all of those pieces start coming together, I was like, this is just unbelievable. And so from there, in writing my book, it was like he was in a chair sitting next to me telling me what to write. And the whole process and the book is about alternative or mental approaches based on African-centered thought to enhance what clinicians already do in psychotherapy. And the other reason that prompted me, well, it's not a reason. Nothing happens by mistake. So I was inspired and motivated to look at, well, if these disorders are what they say they are, the main issue I had to look at is the trauma. And there are many variations of trauma. And his book spelled it out because he talks about the cruelties he experienced as a child, let alone the plantation. And to find out that what Frederick Douglass said in this book by, I can't think of his name, it's called The Delectable Negro, Vince Woodward, I think. He's passed away now, but it's on Amazon. Another raging fear on the plantation was they feared being eaten. I was like, what? They ate Nat Turner. And it's not documented it's in Woodward's book, but it's not documented. But there is a 1832 government document that talks about the Nat Turner insurrection. As a result, the legislature of Virginia they had agreed to close every avenue of the African or enslaved people so that they would not know who they are, and then they would be in control for generations. And that is exactly what happened. That's what happened. So James Pennington and all of his sermons coincided with what I was doing, and why I stress how important the family lineage is because there's something called a lineage blueprint. We come with it. We are our ancestors. We stand on their shoulders. Without them, we don't exist. It's when that sperm meets the egg, it's the Big Bang. But what comes along with that is when we're born, then the spirit of that meets the soul. And this is where the two become one. So in the scripture, because I've been baptized 7 times, raised Catholic, deacon board, you name it, choir, I've been in, and all of it's relevant at some points in our lives. And I don't deny that, I believe Jesus is who Jesus is, but it's Yahshua. So the history's been so twisted that we lack one of the main, I call it a mental dysfunction, not a disorder, but as a result of the disorder, the dysfunction is identity. And that comes by way of, like I just said, the disorder, because the disorder is a direct shaping and controlling of how Black people think. And it's that because we were forced to assimilate and acculturate. I don't care how you look at it. There's just, the language was taken, which is key in identity. The culture was stripped. The spiritual traditions have always been referred to as negative, even though, I want to be clear here, even though Sigmund Freud, who they call the father of psychotherapy, went to a place called Kemet in Egypt, which is old Egypt, that they're still feuding about, that Egyptians wasn't Black. Well, Kemet was. The 25th dynasty has been alleviated, but that was Kush, Nubia, and Kemet. Freud studied in the mystery schools of Kemet, and he borrowed 3 principles from what's called the Code of Mayat, also known as a negative confession. There's 42 life living principles, like as above, the Hermetic Tahuti principles is like as above, so below, and all of that. But he borrowed the 3, and the 3 that he borrowed is how he developed his psychoanalyst and the theory to support it, which is the id, ego, superego, as well as the personality, his personality premise as well. So when I found that out and found out that his student Young did the same thing, I was like, oh, this is really. So if you know that, because ID stands for identity, and the ego represents the physical world, or I should say, our emotions that are directly influenced by our five senses. There are more than five, but that's the main ones. And I said, well, and the super ego is the external environment. And the example of that would be social media, how that shapes what you think. And so in looking at that, and so with what I talk about in my book is a spiritual premise. It's very simple: know thyself. To thine own self be true. And that is the challenge that we have, because once you understand who you are, no one can define you, and that is your identity. And then you understand, then your purpose for which you was born is revealed. And this is what Jesus taught on a deeper level, and what he meant by the blind will see, the lame will walk, the deaf will hear. He will hear what the Spirit has to say. But that gets construed, and I'm going to use one more scripture because Pennington that's how he was able to get his message across. He couldn't use the basis of what he knew in African spirituality, because to the enslavers and all that whole era, it was voodoo and witchcraft and all of that. But that's not what voodoo is. But I'm not getting into those categories. But witchcraft actually came out of England. And that came by way of Francis Galton, who was the cousin to Sigmund Freud. So I hope I'm being clear in drawing a distinction between mental disorders and mental dysfunctions, because this is what the point of it is to understand that there is a difference. So when I talk about identity is your lineage. And so if you don't know that, or you don't know anything about your family, it's a problem, and you're going to become depressed, anxiety, for reasons unknown. And the thing about medication, even in the case of schizophrenia and those things, the medication, the symptoms, the side effects of the medication that people take, and I'm not in any way telling people to stop taking their medicine. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the side effects are literally closely aligned with the symptoms listed in the criteria of a book that we use called the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, to diagnose a person with a certain disorder. And let's just hypothetically use depression, because it is a mood disorder. Well, when you talk about depression or bipolar, it's about swinging from one emotion to another. But in Africa-centered ancestral healing, that is natural, because it's the seasons of the soul. And on a linear side, they're saying you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't feel that way. Yes, you should feel that way. There are many circumstances, because that's the natural flow of life. It's not about that. It's about what is the solution. And then there's so many tools to use to pick yourself up out of a situation like that. I mean, for instance, in my family, I'll just give you an example, because that's the only true thing I can say is my experience, right? And the experience here, in looking back in the family tree, I discovered that trauma and self-sabotage were two of the main issues in our family tree. And all of this is what the book, I'm speaking about the book now, but the book is based on my great grandfather's work. So that's why they're sort of intertwined. So as I was going to say, in my personal experience, my aunt died, who I was close to, in 2006. My brother died suddenly of an aneurysm at 52 in 2008. 9 months later, my son was killed in August. After that, my mother became ill. No, my father was in Katrina. So I had to go to New Orleans and bring him. At the time, I was living in Crystal City, Virginia. And then my mother became ill with kidneys. She had kidney failure. And I had to come to Seattle, which is where I reside now, and bring her to Virginia. And I took care of her in my home for 3 years. Then she passed away in January. My father died in August, 6 months later. Then I was broken at this point. Then I relocated back to Seattle from New Orleans and Chicago, but back here. And then my grandson died on the football field. He was 16, not drug related. He had a heart attack because it was hot, and a student coach was directing them, and he had a helmet on and fell out on the field and had a heart attack. Now, that's traumatic grief. In the world of clinical psychology or psychotherapy, they will give you Zoloft or something for anxiety. Under the ancestral healing method, it is about taking spiritual baths and praying and having a good support group of like-minded individuals to help you through. And it's more to it than I'm saying. Just like the Native Americans have sweat lodges. That's why we do conferences, to make people aware that you're not alone in whatever it is you're going through. And I learned that from my great, great, great grandfather. I'm the third generation from him. Is that I went to Hagerstown, which is where he was from. I retraced his footsteps. And I was like, how did he get around? They did not have cars. He was a fugitive slave. This man has been all over the country and outside Jamaica, Heidelberg, Germany, really? Yale, he couldn't sit in the classroom, so he had to sit outside the classroom. And now Yale honors him, but they do not honor the family. So my question is, why is that? That does not speak to healing. It speaks to propaganda. But the people that we have been in touch with at Yale, they have been nice. They partially gave us a financial commitment for the conference. And the young man who was responsible, Noah Humphrey, for Pennington getting that matriculate degree is a Yale alumni. And we've gotten him to be the spokesperson for the family because we have other projects coming up. So that is basically what the book is about. The book goes there and it talks about the need for Black psychologists, and we're advocating for a root psychology discipline within psychology departments, specifically in HBCUs, but any university or college. Black psychology is the only field that is not recognized as a program or as a degreed program. Oh, you can take Black psychology as an elective, or you may find some things under the African American Studies department. But to say you want to major in root psychology, or don't even say root Black psychology, it doesn't exist. And this is 2024. So what happens with clinical psychology and the transpersonal, which is spiritual, they got all kinds of positive psychology. All of those things are systems that only further could condition and reiterate systems of acculturation and assimilation. So I've classified Black people in 5 categories, and this is in my book: Negro, Black, African American, Afro American, and colored. Each one of those categories had a movement was behind it. And today is 2024, and we already know what the political climate looks like. The sad thing is that you have Black people in high places that can't hear or see the journey. They're not in it to support companies like mine or programs like mine because of their status and money. It's politically driven. And unless you get on the bandwagon with people of that like-minded set, then they don't embrace the change. It's called a comfort zone. You see, Black people are a we collective by nature. The me and my collective is ego-driven. And that is, what are we teaching our children about where they came from? When we grew up, it was story, and those storytellers, and that was like social media. Granddaddy used to sit there and tell us these stories about Pennington and John Copeland. Copeland is not related to Pennington, but he also is someone on our tree. He died at Harper's Ferry with John Brown, just to clarify who John Copeland is. So at that point, when you look at it, and in ACA, which is African-centered Ancestral Healing, we look at, how do we know what we know? There's only one way to know what you know, other than knowing thyself. For time immemorial, we've learned, meaning African people, from nature and the universe. You see, and that's a deeper level of a conversation that I'm willing to have when we talk about feminine and masculine energy, and how we come about, how we ask to come here. You pick your parents. I know it sounds crazy. I thought the same thing. It's true. And that brings me to the point of the family tree and a pedigree chart. When you do your family tree, today it's pretty easy to go back 3, maybe even 4 generations. I'm 70 years old, so during my time, that's not it. That was not a conveniency, right? And a lot of the work I did was prior to internet. So in that journey and learning and understanding the family tree, what emerges is the patterns that you see, that your grandmother, grandfather, whoever, how it comes down the line. So let's just say in my family, there was a lot of grieving. And so grief tended to be one of the things that needed to be addressed, that people now identify as generational curses. What is a generational curse? Well, pin that and just think of this. When you talk about spell casting, what we speak, we create. It begins with the thought. That's where the category came from England, witchcraft, spelling. The subject spelling, SPLL, because of what you speak, you create or co-create. So if you're always tired, you're going to be tired. You attract that energy into your life. And it gets more complicated, but I'm going to keep it right there. So the thing about the family tree is you look at the pattern. As I said, in mine, it was grief. Then I transfer what I've learned from the tree. And I do genetic genealogy online. if anyone is interested. It's a course, and I do ancestral healing. It's virtual online as well. But we have other professors that teach other courses at my institute. Okay, back to the family tree. So then you take what you learn from the family tree and you look at a pedigree chart. Go to the pedigree chart, which is more specific, and we call it genetic because it's science-based. The family tree isn't science-based. It is composed of the narratives you've learned and the research or however you've gotten your information about the family tree. On the pedigree chart, let's say we're taking grief over to the pedigree chart, and then there's some tests done with strips that they use to see what is the cause of death. Then you look at death certificates, and these things are the sort which are more accurate today than they were in the 19th century. They didn't even really have death certificates. Some cities, depending on where you lived. So that pedigree chart will show you that people in that family who exhibited a pattern of grief primarily died of kidney disease, meaning kidney disorders. And we have a lot of people on dialysis today because every organ in our body, now this is in my book, this is ACA, this is the enhancement to clinical therapy. Okay, so I want to make sure for people to understand that we're talking two different systems here. So with ACA, and you look at the kidneys, and the kidney is the main disease, and this is where the curse goes at, is that how do you break that? Well, you break that by having healing circles, talking about it, writing about it. People talk about shadow work. I'm not big on that either. But journaling is good. Make your vision book, but make a family one, make an individual one for you. And then as you learn these things, that's when you learn them, you're breaking the curse. When it begins to spell itself out to you, you're breaking the curse. So as I was mentioning about the 9 organs, there are 9 organs in our body. Each organ is related to an emotion. So and what it does, the liver cleanses the body. Without a liver, you won't live. Without really any of them, silence is golden. So our organs, it's not like if you hit your arm or something. That it's a whole nother universe going on inside our bodies. Every 7 years, we get a new set of cells, which means we change. And that's what's called a growth and aging process. We go through phases. You're born, you're toddler, and so forth. And those 9 organs are connected to, guess what? Depending on when you were born, 9 planets that circle around the sun for the energy. And that's where true astrology comes from. Because the characteristics of the planet, depending on the time you are born, let's say me, again, I'm Pisces, so I was born under Neptune. Neptune is the planet for Pisces. So the characteristics of Neptune being a spiritual planet, because it has a lot of water, is reflective. The characteristic is reflective of your personality. So people born under that sign that's how they determine it. And they furthermore equate it to an animal, which I don't know if people know about chakra systems here, but that is everything I'm speaking to you about is in my book. So the chakra systems, the first 3, beginning with the genitalia, in the next one, it's a system between the navel and that. Those are the lower chakras. Those are the instinctual chakras. Those are the bottom one. The root chakra is where creativity comes. It's the sexual center. And we say sex, people don't realize that doesn't mean just physical intercourse. It is a creative center. So whatever you birth comes from that, be it a book, writing, whatever, it comes from there. The chakra above that one is how you think. It's governed by the water, the moon. And then the navel is midstream, it's midway, it's our emotions. So those three, there's a whole lot that goes with that. And then the next three going upward, which I'm not going to get into, are the heavenly ones. That is when you have spiritual awakenings, because you've balanced your behaviors between the first three. You can't get to the next three unless you balance yourself out and live a healthy lifestyle. And we do that many ways. There's only three aspects to the human beings on this journey, and that's the mental, physical, and spiritual. The sad thing is most people do not understand spirituality and equate it with religion. It has nothing to do with religion. You practice whatever you are is what you are, what you practice. But whatever it is, if you're not consistent and true to that, you're never going to be able to ascend to a higher level of consciousness. And so those are the levels. And when you look at the numbers 1 through 9, and you can Google or go to YouTube and find a lot of things about Tesla, because there's only 9 numbers. Anything over and under, anything over 9 is added to or taken from. And that's what they mean in Revelation when they talk about the taking from and adding to. You see, the Bible is metaphoric in many ways, and most of the New Testament is written by Paul. He did not know Jesus like that. He was not a disciple. And the letters, the books like Corinthians, Galatians, all those were different groups he wrote letters to. The disciples never accepted him because of, what he did, what they say he did. Let me say that. And even when we go back, when we talk about ancestral healing, a lot of people don't understand this. And it's a very important point. The book of Genesis is actually genealogy. And then they go and talk about in the next book who begot who. They do that for a reason. So you know who you are and where you come from. And then that determines your purpose. And that was the case. That was definitely the case of Jesus and any of other prophets. When they become one with the work they do, it's about the work that you do in this level of what we call the 3-dimensional journey. But we forget that and get caught up in judging and ego stuff, what we like, and all of those things are not going to move you forward. And that's where the real mental dysfunctions come in at. And disorders, I should say. So those are some of the things that we explain more in detail in specific courses that you can go to our website and download the course guide if you're interested to know more. The website is www.IAC as in cat, T as in Tom, NOW0119.com. And I'd just like to say on May 8th, we're having Dr. Jameson, Darif Jameson, come and talk about mental health. And I'm going to be talking about generational curses and trauma. And there's no such thing as post-traumatic slavery disorder or trauma. People speak that, but we're not in a post. And as soon as when we can recognize and realize that, I think the greater illusion is that we're all one. We're not. And it's okay. We were not intended to be that way. Now, on a humanity level, you could say we're people. So again, let me go back to the nature theory. If what we've learned is from nature and what we've learned is from the universe, and Dr. Mitchell, who was one of the first astronauts to go to NASA, he has a very interesting book where he talks about his experience, and you can YouTube him, Dr. Mitchell, Mitchell, and he talks about that experience being that far up in the midst of stars. But back to what I'm saying about if we learn from nature, like cats are cats, right? That's their category, cats. But you don't see a jaguar with a lion or tiger with a jaguar or black panther or a cougar. But they're all cats. But they're beautiful in who they are. Even with trees, trees stand along the highways, country, or wherever in families. You're not going to find an oak tree with a pine tree. So what am I saying? When I say we all are one, we are not, we're different. And the beauty of that is that a bouquet is much more beautiful than one set of flowers. Like tulips are beautiful, roses are beautiful. But when you have a bouquet with an assortment, it's even more beautiful. So if we can get together collectively, and then we can understand each other. No people are dominant, no people are superior to each other. To understand that the history of Black people has been twisted, distorted, so many ways. I mean, I can go on and on and on, but in so many ways that when the truth is revealed, people don't believe it, even Black people. So what happens is Black people are used to make the point for the oppressor. We have to stop that. We have to walk in the glory of who we are as a people. Stand up, as Cynthia Erivo says in her song, that Harriet Tubman song. And speaking of Harriet Tubman, I'm going to slow down and let you guys ask questions. But speaking of Harriet Tubman, my great, I'll just say Grandpa Pennington, he named my great-grandmother, his granddaughter, Araminta Pennington, because of his friend Harriet Tubman. Her real name was Araminta. As a result, we have 4 Aramintas in our family. And so the importance of that is, you see, during that period, and I'll go back to my great-grandfather, his son, when he moved to Florida, that his mother was Choctaw. But the reason that I believe, with what I know about Pennington, is that those things were left out was because fear, again, of being sold into slavery. I mean, they could just take you and do what they want. They didn't want the other family members to be at risk because they would punish them. They would beat them. So everything had to be quiet. And while he did marry a lady named Elmira Way, they had no children. So the son that's listed on there, Thomas Pennington, is not his biological son. Actually, hers either. He is the son of Harriet, which was his a good friend of his. No, Harriet was the wife. They both had a good friend because they were all together in the abolition movement, and she was dying, and she asked him to adopt her son in the church, and he did. And that's why if you look at the census, it'll say inferred. But the biological family, being us, is not listed. I have the proof, but they didn't list it. And those are some of the reasons that the people of abolition that were doing the great works that they've done and still people today, well, today you don't have to really be as concerned about it, is because they would do those horrible things to families. And some of the census reports of the 20th and 19th century are sketchy because they didn't want to give out family information. And that's why has been the way it is from people that were active in the 19th century. I am just so honored and proud to share this story, hopefully that it will encourage others to look up who they are, their family lineage. Even if you were adopted, the records are there. You just have to know how to go about it. And like I said, I teach that too. So anyway, I just want to thank you, Tammy, for having me on. I love the work that you're doing, and hopefully we will be able to collaborate on some Pennington projects. I want a seat at the table with Connecticut Freedom Trail. We want that because we're in Seattle.
Well, it's okay that you're out of Seattle because that's part of being a descendant automatically qualifies you for being on the Connecticut Freedom Trail. So you will be at the table and you will be able to influence how your ancestors' narrative is being told, because the mission of the Connecticut Freedom Trail is to tell the Black narrative's point of view. And who better to tell that story than a descendant? So you are definitely have a seat at the table starting tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So we have our Freedom Trail meeting every fourth Wednesday at 4 p.m. So you are definitely at that table. So thank you very much for all that you do. We do have some comments and a couple of questions going on here in the chat. Let's see here. We're going to start with Andre Kidd. He wanted you to yeah, Andre Kidd. He wanted you to talk more about psychology being an assimilation. What is that?
Well, we know what assimilate means. Mm-hmm. We know what acculturate means. Acculturate. It means that the systems that are used by in general psychology are systems that are oppressive. Like, what do they teach you? You teach abnormal psychology. That's a good one. Clinical psychology. But all of those things, then paradigms that are taught in those different, we call them applied psychologies. They don't apply to Black people. They apply only in terms of the imbalanced behavior that has been externally thrusted up on you growing up. Everything you learn, especially 0 to 5, everything you learn beginning in school, the education system reiterates those things that will keep people mentally locked down. Every culture has a way to deal with those mental, I'll say, dysfunction. So let me give you an example, Andre, in psychology, because psychology is driven by the APA, American Psychological Association. At one point, they've changed it now. Every 10 years, we have that book come out. Now it's the DSM-5. Because of these very reasons, in the DSM-4, they had an area called culture-bound syndromes that really mocked the ways of different groups like Native Americans and what they did. So they will go in and give people that are not of what they consider mainstream people or the dominant culture or whatever, they will give diagnosis and medicate them. Mm-hmm. And that's taught in psychology. If you want to be a clinical psychologist, you have to go through those trainings. Mm-hmm. And so now you've got a client that comes to see you, and everything is set up from the color of the room, the clock, to everything. The questions you're asking is called cultural misdiagnosis. You learn that in general psychology. There's so many different psychology courses that are required to meet the the standards of whatever that degree is. You can just look over some of the curriculums, and when you look over those curriculums, you'll see nothing black, and black psychology, like I said, is an elective.
Gotcha. Thank you. There's also, he says, you say you aren't into shadow work. What exactly is shadow work?
Well, just what it says. Shadow work is looking at your life and the things that you feel block you um, in your subconscious. See, it's subconscious blockages. And so, what the shadow work, the objective of shadow work, is to release or unblock those blockages.
Okay, got you. He says, you said the political system does not embrace the change, and the change of the Black perspective is being introduced. The actual history, are you talking about the actual history or the retelling of the whole story?
Both.
Both. Okay, you're talking about both. All right. Let's see here. He loves your association with practicing your belief and consistency, aspiring to higher levels of consciousness. And then he goes on to say, "Hell to you, my sister Pisces."
Thank you, Andre.
But you will actually see Andre tomorrow. He is on the Freedom Trail, so you will see him tomorrow at the meeting. Well, we are at the end of the program. Let me just double check to make sure I'm not overlooking anyone's question or comments. Nope. Well, thank you so very much, Dr. Orisade. I really appreciate you coming in to share. Oh, I have a question before we go. Where does generational trauma fit into what? Would you label it generational trauma because of the, like you said, generational curses? But I don't believe in generational curses either. I believe that it's generational trauma that's just been passed down because people just lack the skill and the communication level of how to deal with that trauma. So would you call it generational trauma?
Absolutely, because it begins in the womb when you're conceived.
Mm-hmm.
And it's reflected whatever the mothers, remember I was talking about the emotions, whatever the mother is experiencing emotionally is transferred onto the child. So that whole development process in the womb through the phases is traumatic. The first orchestra they hear is the water, and the second is the heartbeat for the drum. So that whole process is traumatic. So when you're born, because you're an ancestor return, you're returning with karma, and depending on understanding what that karma is, because you come here to clear it up, then that is what generational trauma is.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much again for taking the time and for joining us. It's a 3-hour difference. So thank you for getting up and being present to present this for us. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
I will be there.
Again, thank you so very much. We really appreciate you being on the show today. And thank you, everyone, for out in social media land. Thank you for joining us. We have upcoming programs on the Freedom Trail. Juneteenth, celebrated with us on Saturday, June 15th. And this is a different one because it is actually in person. It's our first one in person since COVID. It's going to be Champion for Freedom, the Reverend Alexander Heritage with Dolly Marshall and our very own John Mills. Then Tuesday, the 25th, we will have our actual conversation, monthly conversation at noon. And it is a conversation with the same two people from Saturday with Dolly Marshall and John Mills, where Dolly Marshall will talk about her film and John Mills will talk about his research that actually brought the two of them together to talk about the whole family. And then Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024 at noon, we have Honoring the Legacy, a guide of African-American monuments with travel historian Tammy Gibson. So thank you all so very much for being with us. We appreciate the support. Again, take the survey. Let us know how we're doing and let us know if there's something you would like to see on the show. Until the next time, everyone.